Well, we visit this weekend, Mike, with Mr. Mark Stock from Big Iron Auctions. You hear his report every weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness, but we wanted to visit at a little greater length about what's going on out there. First of all, Mark, we understand that market for used equipment was so robust in the last weeks of 2020. What about this first quarter of the new year? Is it still?
It is very robust. In fact, we're seeing some record auction prices established almost every week on our online auction basis. And primarily, Max, because availability of new equipment is not accessible. We've been told you can't get a new tractor until the middle or end of August. So for those folks that are looking for additional equipment to get their planting done, they're looking now for the real good used low-hour equipment. And we just sold an 8320R 2 weeks ago for $250,000 that had under 500 engine hours on that machine. And what was unique about that particular sale, Max, was the seller, who was a retired farmer, was getting calls from dealers from several states because they were trying to get that tractor purchased for some of their customers.
You know, I've seen some of these social media photographs in recent weeks of guys really cleaning up their equipment, polishing up the combine and the tractors. Does the appearance matter when it comes time to sell a used piece of equipment?
It definitely does. In fact, you don't usually see something that come right off the farm sitting in the front line of an implement dealership when it's traded. It usually goes back into the wash bay, and it gets detailed and prepped all up so it can be set in front row ready, so to speak. So we have a saying here at Big Iron: if you take care of your equipment, it'll take care of you when you sell it. If you beat it when you use it, it's going to beat you right back when you sell it. And that is so true. So folks, it is very important to take care of the machinery that you use in your operation, because it does hold its value well.
What else has been selling well other than tractors, Mark? What about spraying equipment, planters, anything come to mind, tillage equipment?
Planters are really, really popular right now. We've had a run starting last year with planters, and that run hasn't slowed up at all. Planting equipment is in high demand, primarily because people's window of getting that seed in the ground gets shorter and shorter. A lot of these folks who are retiring, they're renting out their land, and the next door neighbors are picking up that additional acreage, and they need to upgrade from a 16 row to a 24. We've even seen these 54 and 48 row planters selling for tremendously high prices in recent online auctions. So planters are real popular right now.
When a producer buys that second planter, how particular is he or she? Do they lower the standards a little bit for that second piece of equipment?
Not really. In fact, I think most of them increase their standards. We see a lot of the planters that really sell well are the ones that are loaded up with precision equipment. They've got all the fancy high-speed equipment on it so they can cover more acres. So I think they keep that secondary planter, the one that they are now having their operation, is primarily their backup. Or some folks, they tell me they use their one planter for beans and one planter for corn. That way they run them both at the same time.
Earlier planting of soybeans, we're hearing more growers talk about that because they're getting results. That means they have to move swiftly when there's that window of opportunity.
Yeah, definitely higher yields when soybeans are planted earlier. And we see the soybean drills, we see the 20-inch row planters are real popular because of that. The air seeders are real popular. People like to use those to get those beans in the ground. And running two planters at the same time, if you can find the help, definitely helps put additional revenue in your pocket.
Is there anything else that comes to mind as far as equipment is concerned before we start to talk about land?
Well, you know, we got a lot of retiring folks who are thinking about retiring, but now they see this $4.50 plus new crop opportunities. And I want to strongly encourage those folks, the best time to probably have a retirement sale is when everybody has those same opportunities, because they're the ones that are going to have a little jingle in their pocket. And if you want to sell your equipment and recapture as much money as you possibly can, selling when there's a shortage of equipment available, which is right now, and selling when people have additional revenue in their pocket because of high commodity prices and cheap interest rates, which is right now, that's something you need to consider about getting scheduled, your retirement sale right now.
Land, not just for farm use, but rural land. In the most recent reports from the Federal Reserve Bank, we've noticed that there is a hot demand for rural land. Is that going to continue, Mark?
I definitely think it's going to continue. Of course, if you get to the bigger cities, more and more of the good farmland's taken out of production and turned into housing or commercial development. But what we're also seeing is a new added commodity in the land market, which is called carbon credits. And a lot of folks are looking into what that's going to add to value for their land. So we've got investors looking into purchasing land. We've got farmers who want to expand their operation looking to purchase land. And we're seeing this historic low long-term fixed interest rates, Max, that are driving that market. And of course, $13 soybeans and $4.50 corn isn't hurting anything.
If we look at that carbon market, now there's much that we don't know yet. We don't know how all of this is going to finally play out in terms of private and government involvement. But are there some things that the landowner should be keeping in mind as he or she prepares perhaps for marketing that land on down the road?
Well, you said a mouthful, and we really don't know exactly how it's going to be worked into the system, because if the government gets involved and they determine whether you're going to give somebody more credit for taking a conventional farm and turning it into a no-till operation, because a no-till operation apparently has more carbon in the soils than a conventional deal is. There's a lot of moving parts right now when carbon credits come on board, but we do know that several states are mandating that businesses and industry all be carbon neutral in just a couple years. And when that happens, if they need that additional carbon credit somewhere, they're going to be reaching out to all the ag land producers and ag land owners to see if they can strike a deal, so to speak, to take advantage of some of those credits.
If someone is involved in a land transaction right now, Mark, or they anticipate it in the weeks ahead, should they be looking at putting in some kind of a clause in there relative to that carbon market and what could be transpiring? In other words, are there rights, for example, mineral rights we want to retain sometimes? Is there something similar in the carbon market?
Well, we've heard people talk about it. We haven't seen it as of yet, but I'm sure as we get closer to the mandated years, we're going to see a lot more legalese get put into place. We're going to see that drafted into the lease agreements too, because if you got a tenant that is producing the cover crops that are necessary to create more carbon, some of that carbon credit then needs to get passed on back to that tenant and to the landowner in some sort of a shared capacity. So we're going to see a lot of things, Max, shake loose here over the next coming years. And that is why land is all of a sudden becoming high on the deck of cards, so to speak, in terms of the conversation. Another thing is there just isn't a lot of land being sold right now, too. So the scarcity of that and the amount of people that are looking to buy land is putting a good 10 to 15% increase in most of the land sold just in the last 4 months.
10 to 15%, most of the land sold just the last 4 months. You're talking about good prime farmland.
We're talking good prime farmland. Yes, we are. And we're seeing a big spike in that activity and that interest. And it's driven on the reasons why we talked about long-term interest rates, good commodity prices, carbon credits, and the scarcity of sellers wanting to sell their land.
Now, this equity market hasn't exactly gone to the pits. It's not terrible. It's not bad at all. Why aren't more people keeping their investments in the equities and just kind of staying away from what maybe, we had 7 years of tough commodity markets in agriculture, very difficult landscape. Why aren't they a little more shy about investing in ag now?
Why aren't they a little bit more shy? Well, I think they've seen the correction. They've seen a run up in the land prices. They've seen a correction. It's back down a little bit to where they're safe. And now they see that the sky's the limit. We still haven't reached the 2013 and 14 highs in the land market in a lot of the areas. But I think a lot of people have those sights in their minds right now. And if that happens, we'll see a little bit of a run up here. So that's a better return than maybe the stock market is, because a lot of people are nervous that maybe that's a little top heavy right now. We've had a correction. It bounced right back, but now it's you're getting into new chart territories here again. So a lot of people taking money out of that gain in the stock market and they're rolling it into farmland.
We always appreciate the visit, sir. Every week we appreciate your updates, and on this opportunity, thank you for sharing your insight.
Hey, glad to be here, Max, anytime.
Mark Stock, Big Iron Auctions.